Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our stories. Before I get started, tell me where you're watching from. I'm curious to see which cities and towns will join me in this memoir. He was just 24 years old when the sky over northern France turned into a cage of fire and smoke. Lieutenant Jack Ellison, an American pilot flying a P-51 Mustang, had been in the air for barely 20 minutes when the formation was ambushed. The clouds that morning were thick, rolling like bruised cotton across the horizon. Beneath them, the earth was divided between freedom and tyranny, a world at war. Painted in grey, Jack had taken off from a muddy airfield in southern England before dawn. He remembered the smell of coffee, the trembling in his hands as he buttoned his leather flight jacket, and the brief nod he gave to his crew chief before climbing into the cockpit. His squadron was tasked with escorting bombers on a mission deep into enemy territory. Routine, they had called it. But routine didn't exist in 1944, not when every mission could be your last. The morning light broke through the clouds in slivers, illuminating the contrails of the formation. Jack's Mustang, with its polished silver body and the name Lucky Lady painted beneath the cockpit, hummed with life. He ran his gloved fingers along the throttle, eyes fixed on the horizon. The radio crackled, static, followed by the calm voice of his flight leader, Major Dunn. "Keep tight, boys. Flak reports ahead. Stay sharp." And then, it happened. The sky erupted in black bursts of anti-aircraft fire. The first explosions hit high, harmlessly above them. But the next volley found its mark. One of the bombers caught fire instantly, disintegrating in a flash of orange and silver. Jack flinched as debris shot past his canopy. His hands tightened on the stick, heart pounding as tracer rounds streaked through the clouds. A formation of German FW-190s had dived out of the sun, their engines screaming, guns blazing. Jack rolled hard to the left, chasing one of the enemy fighters. The two machines spiraled downward, engines howling in fury. He squeezed the trigger, and his 6.50 caliber machine guns roared. The German fighter shuddered, trailing smoke. But in that same moment, Jack's aircraft was hit. The impact slammed him forward, his shoulder cracking against the harness. Warning lights blinked red on the control panel. The Mustang shuddered violently, oil splattering across the windscreen. "Mayday, mayday! I'm hit!" Losing altitude, he shouted into the radio, his voice breaking. No one answered. Just static below, the French countryside stretched out like a patchwork quilt, green fields, winding rivers, and small villages unaware of the battle raging above. Jack pulled back on the stick, trying to keep control, but his right wing was gone, shredded by flak. Flames licked along the fuselage. He made the only decision left to him. He had to bail out. The canopy blew open, the wind roaring in his ears. He leaped into the void, the freezing air ripping the breath from his lungs. For a brief, terrifying moment, the world was silent except for the rush of air. Then his parachute deployed, jerking him upward. He drifted through the smoke, watching as his beloved Mustang plummeted, disappearing into the trees below. The explosion came seconds later, a single, muffled thunderclap that seemed to echo through his bones. When Jack hit the ground, he was in a wheat field, his parachute tangled in the stalks. He lay still for a moment, dazed, the distant rumble of engines fading. His hands were trembling. He touched the dirt, realizing how solid and alive it felt compared to the cold metal of the cockpit. He was alive. But deep inside, he knew, he was also behind enemy lines. He quickly gathered his parachute, shoving it beneath a hedge. Smoke was still rising from the crash site a mile away. He could hear voices, German voices, carried faintly on the wind. Jack crouched low, heart hammering. He had to move. He had to disappear. The next few hours were a blur of fear and exhaustion. He ran through the fields, climbed fences, and crawled through ditches. Once, he heard the rumble of a truck and pressed himself into the mud as headlights swept over the road nearby. Every sound, every gust of wind made him jump. His flight jacket, once a symbol of pride, now marked him as a target. By dusk, he found refuge in the ruins of an old farmhouse. The roof had collapsed, and ivy crept through the cracks in the walls. He sat in the shadows, shivering, listening to the distant barking of dogs and the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel. German patrols. They were searching for him that night. He thought of home, of his mother's kitchen in Kansas, of his father's workshop, the sound of the radio humming softly during dinner. He thought of Mary, the girl who had written him every week, whose photograph was still tucked inside his flight suit. The world felt impossibly far away. He didn't sleep much. The moon rose high over the countryside, bathing the ruins in a pale, ghostly light. Jack kept his hand on his sidearm, though he knew it would do little good. He was a single man in enemy territory. And yet, something inside him refused to give up. At dawn, he heard footsteps. He froze. Through the broken wall, he saw a figure moving through the fog, a young woman, carrying a basket. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied back beneath a scarf. She moved quietly, scanning the field as if expecting something. Jack held his breath. Then, she saw him. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither moved. Then, she spoke, softly, in accented English. "You are American." Jack hesitated, then nodded. She looked around nervously, then gestured for him to follow. "Come. Quickly. Before they find you." He didn't know her name yet, or why she was willing to risk her life for a stranger. But as he stepped out of the ruins and into the morning fog, one thing was certain: his mission had just changed. He was no longer just a pilot. He was a survivor, trapped in a land that wasn't his own, depending on the kindness and courage of those who refused to surrender to fear. And somewhere out there, beyond the fields and rivers of occupied France, the war was waiting for him to find his way back. The dawn light filtered through the mist like liquid silver, casting the French countryside in a fragile, ethereal glow. Jack followed the young woman cautiously, every muscle tense, every sense alert. The village ahead was small, the stone cottages huddled together under slate roofs, smoke curling from chimneys. It seemed peaceful, almost untouched by the war raging just beyond the hills. But Jack knew better. He had seen the destruction from above, the way towns could vanish in a heartbeat. The woman led him down narrow lanes, glancing over her shoulder at intervals. Her name, he learned quickly, was Elise. Her voice carried a quiet authority, but beneath it lingered an edge of fear, a recognition of the danger surrounding them. She moved with purpose, and Jack tried to match her pace, his legs stiff from the night's flight and the fall. They arrived at a modest home at the edge of the village. It was sturdy, with ivy crawling up the walls, and the smell of fresh bread still lingering from the previous evening. Inside, it was warm and dimly lit. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows. Elise motioned for him to sit while she spoke to someone in a hushed tone. Jack's eyes took in the room: shelves lined with jars of preserves, a loom in the corner, photographs of family members pinned above the mantel. This was a place of life, not war. And yet war had touched it in subtle ways. The window shutters had small holes patched with scraps of metal. A chair bore marks of hurried repair. A man entered from the back, middle-aged, with calloused hands and a grave expression. He spoke in low tones to Elise, and though Jack didn't understand the words, the gestures and glances told him all he needed to know. They were planning how to hide him, how to keep him alive. Jack realized then the stakes. He was no longer just a pilot behind enemy lines. He had become a symbol, a story of defiance, and the lives of these people were now entwined with his own. He swallowed hard, the weight of their courage pressing down on him. Over the next few days, he adapted to a new kind of life. Dawn came with chores and the quiet rhythm of rural France, rather than the roar of engines. Elise taught him how to move without attracting attention, how to blend into the fields, how to read the patterns of German patrols. Every day was a test of nerve. Every night, he lay awake listening for footsteps, for the soft scrape of boots on gravel, the distant bark of dogs trained to sniff out strangers. Jack also had to think creatively. He was an American pilot, trained for aerial combat, not espionage or subterfuge. Yet survival demanded he learn quickly. He became adept at disguising himself as a local, at masking the American cadence in his speech, at mimicking the gait of those who walked these roads daily. Each successful evasion built his confidence, each near capture sharpened his resolve. One afternoon, he overheard German soldiers questioning a villager at the market. Jack froze behind a stack of crates, his heart pounding, as the patrol lingered. They asked questions about travelers, about sightings of aircraft, about anyone new in the area. Elise, nearby, whispered in his ear, "Do not move. They watch everything." He pressed himself flat against the wall, breath shallow, until finally the soldiers moved on, oblivious to the American hiding mere feet away. The psychological strain was immense. Jack felt the tension of constant vigilance gnawing at him. Yet, through it all, he discovered a profound respect for the resilience of the French villagers. They had lived under occupation for years, navigating fear and danger daily, yet they still extended a hand to a stranger, a soldier of an army half a world away. It was a lesson in courage that would shape him forever. Then came the moment that would define his entire experience. Elise brought word that a German patrol would be passing near the village soon, and it was too risky to stay in the farmhouse. Jack had to move, and fast. They ventured into the fields under the cover of twilight, the fading sun painting the wheat in golden fire. The soldiers' boots crunched against gravel roads in the distance. Every sound was amplified, an owl hooting, a dog barking, the snap of a twig underfoot. In that tense silence, Jack reflected on the irony of war. He had trained for months to fight the enemy head-on, but survival often required cunning, patience, and subtlety, not brute force. Every heartbeat, every cautious step was a battle. And yet, amidst the fear, there was beauty, fields stretching endlessly, the warmth of human kindness, the faint smell of bread and smoke carried on the wind. As they reached a hidden path through the woods, Jack glimpsed the distant glint of a river, its surface catching the last light of dusk. He paused, letting the moment sink in. This was no longer a battlefield of bombs and dogfights, but a different kind of war, one of shadows, whispers, and courage under pressure. He looked at Elise, her face illuminated by the fading sun, and for the first time, he allowed himself a measure of hope. They were not out of danger, not by far, but together they had carved a path forward. And somewhere in the distance, he knew, there would be a way to return, not just to the skies he loved, but to the life he had left behind. The night closed in around them, wrapping the fields and the forest in a velvet darkness. Jack moved silently beside Elise, every sense alert, every nerve straining. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the war raged on. But for now, in that quiet, fragile moment, a young American pilot learned the true meaning of courage, resourcefulness, and trust. The next morning arrived with a muted grey sky, the kind that pressed down on the countryside like a weight. Jack awoke on a thin straw mattress in a hidden loft of a barn, the faint smell of hay and horses mingling with the lingering chill. He was sore from the night's journey, every muscle aching, but there was little time to dwell on discomfort. The Germans were thorough in their searches, and staying in one place too long was a risk he could not afford. Elise was already awake, moving quietly across the loft, her movements precise and practiced. "We must leave before the patrols increase," she whispered, her voice steady but urgent. "There is a route through the hills. It will take us toward the river. We may find help there." Jack nodded, suppressing a shiver. He had come to rely on Elise's judgment, on her calm in moments when panic threatened to overwhelm him. She knew the terrain, the patrols, the secret pathways, better than any map could show. He trusted her, but he also knew that every step was a gamble with life and death. They set out just after dawn, moving along narrow paths carved between the fields. The morning mist clung to the ground, draping the wheat and wildflowers in a damp, ghostly sheen. Jack's boots sank slightly into the soft earth, and each sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant crowing of a rooster, the snap of twigs underfoot. Every shadow felt alive, every sound a possible threat. As they crested a hill, the village below came into view. Smoke still rose from chimneys, and the faint outlines of soldiers moving along the roads could be seen. Jack's heart tightened. He had been invisible for days, but here, with the world spread out before him, he felt vulnerable. "You must blend with the workers," Elise instructed, pointing to a small group tending the fields. "If you look like one of them, they will pass without notice. Move carefully, keep your head down." Jack nodded, adjusting his posture, slowing his breathing, forcing himself into the rhythm of the locals. He followed Elise's lead, weaving among the laborers, pretending to lift baskets of grain and rake soil. The Germans were nearby, patrolling, speaking in clipped tones, but they didn't pause. Every second that passed without incident felt like a small victory, a confirmation that he could survive in this world of quiet peril. Hours passed like this, a tense dance of shadows and movement. They stopped at a small river, the water flowing swiftly over stones, shimmering with reflected light. Elise led him to a concealed path along the bank, and Jack crouched, peering at the opposite side. There, beyond the water, lay a farmhouse, another possible safe house, another hand of kindness willing to risk everything for a stranger. As they crossed the river, Jack's mind wandered to his squadron back in England. Did they know he was missing? Were they searching, or had he already been written off as lost? The thought tightened in his chest. He had always been confident in his skills, his training, but here, far from the sky he knew so well, he realized how fragile life truly was. Every decision, every misstep could be his last. By late afternoon, they arrived at the farmhouse. It was modest, walls thick and weathered, with a small garden in front. A family greeted them cautiously, a father, mother, and 2 children. Their fear was palpable, but so was their courage. They offered Jack food, a simple meal of bread, cheese, and vegetable stew. He ate quickly, grateful for the sustenance but acutely aware that every crumb might carry a risk, every movement watched. That night, as he lay in the loft above the kitchen, Jack reflected on the extraordinary bravery of these people. They had lived under the shadow of occupation, yet they extended trust to a young man they had never met. It was a kind of courage he had never encountered in the air, silent, patient, enduring. And it gave him hope, but hope was tempered by fear. Each day brought new patrols, new threats, new tests of his ability to survive and remain unseen. He learned to move without sound, to anticipate the paths of German soldiers, to read the language of the land itself, the patterns of the crops, the wind in the trees, the behavior of livestock. Every detail became a potential warning or a lifeline. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elise spoke quietly to him. "There is a way to get you back to your lines," she said. "But it is dangerous. You must trust me completely." Jack looked into her eyes, seeing the resolve there, the unspoken understanding that they were risking everything. "I trust you," he replied, the words simple but heavy with meaning. He knew that the coming days would test every ounce of his courage, every skill he had learned since being shot down, and yet, beneath the fear, beneath the constant tension, there was a spark, a determination not just to survive, but to live. To return home, to fly again, to see the world beyond these fields of war. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but Jack Ellison, the young American pilot, had survived the impossible once. And he would do it again. Night had fallen over the French countryside, thick and heavy, swallowing the fields, forests, and villages in darkness. The moon, a pale witness, cast a dim light that danced across the uneven ground. Jack moved silently beside Elise, each footstep measured, each breath controlled. The path ahead was treacherous, rivers swollen with rain, narrow trails lined with brambles, and patrols that could appear without warning. One misstep could mean capture, imprisonment, or worse. As they advanced, Elise explained the plan. They would travel under the cover of darkness toward a hidden rendezvous point along the river, where members of the French resistance had prepared a small boat to take him to safety. It was a risky move, and Jack felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. Yet he moved forward, driven by the same determination that had carried him through enemy skies hours past. The forest was alive with sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a fox, the occasional snap of a twig. Jack's heart pounded at every noise, a constant reminder that danger was never far away. He had learned to read the land, to anticipate the patrols, and to trust Elise's instincts, but the tension never fully lifted. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared through the trees, searchlights sweeping the terrain in slow, methodical arcs. German soldiers. Jack froze, crouched low behind a fallen log, every muscle coiled tight. The soldiers' boots crunched against the undergrowth as they moved closer, their voices sharp and commanding. Elise whispered urgently, guiding him to a small ditch. They held their breath, hearts hammering, as the patrol passed mere feet away, oblivious to the American hiding in the shadows. When the soldiers moved on, Jack exhaled a long, shaky breath. The danger had been real, immediate, and terrifying. But it was also a test he had passed, a confirmation of his growing skill in the subtle art of survival. He realized that being a pilot had taught him one thing above all: trust your instincts, remain calm under pressure, and never give up. By the first light of dawn, they reached the river. It was swift and cold, the current stronger than it appeared. Elise helped him into a small wooden boat, and they pushed off, slipping silently into the water. The river carried them downstream, the only sounds the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the distant cry of a heron. Jack leaned back, muscles trembling with exhaustion, and let himself finally feel a flicker of relief. The resistance members at the other end of the river were waiting, faces tense but hopeful. They helped him ashore, providing dry clothing, food, and a brief moment of respite. For the first time in days, Jack felt the fragile luxury of safety. He was not out of danger entirely, the German patrols were relentless, but he had made it through the worst. As he rested, Jack reflected on the extraordinary courage he had witnessed, the quiet bravery of Elise, the selflessness of the villagers, the meticulous planning of the resistance. These were ordinary people performing acts of extraordinary heroism, risking everything for a stranger whose only weapon was his determination to survive. He felt a deep, humbling respect for them and an understanding that the war was fought not only in the skies but in the hearts and hands of those who resisted tyranny in silence. In the following days, Jack made his way back to Allied lines, moving cautiously and always with the guidance of the French resistance. When he finally reached safety, the relief was overwhelming. He had survived, but he carried with him the memory of the people who had saved him, the fields he had traversed, the nights spent in fear and hope. Back among his squadron, he returned to the sky with a new perspective. Every mission carried weight, every flight held meaning. And in the quiet moments, he thought of Elise, of the villagers, of the courage that had kept him alive. Their bravery had become part of him, a reminder that heroism is not just in battle but in survival, in the bonds forged under pressure, and in the simple, profound act of helping another human being. Jack Ellison would always remember that crash, that river, that night in the forest, and the young woman who had guided him through the darkness. He had been just a pilot, but he had emerged as something more, a witness to courage, a survivor of war, and a man forever changed by the lives that had intertwined with his own in the quiet, dangerous days behind enemy lines.